Hi everyone, welcome to Tactful and our third session of the Cypress Lunch and Learns with Marie Drake. I'm sure you've come along to a few of them already, but just in case you've missed a few, they are on Expertise Recruitment's YouTube page if you want to check out the previous session. But without further ado, I'll hand it to Marie, who's going to be leading today's discussion.
Thanks, Billy.
Cheers, Marie. Bye.
Going to share my screen quickly. Cool. So welcome to today's lunch and learn session. To those who don't know who I am or missed the previous sessions, my name is Marie and I currently work as a principal test automation engineer at Muse UK. I also blog about testing and test automation at mariedrake.com. And if you want to connect with me to ask me some questions, or if you just want to add me on Twitter, you can reach me at mcruzdrake. So for today's Lunch and Learn, we'll look at the current limitations of testing iframes with Cypress. And then I'll do a quick demo on how we can overcome these limitations and how we can automate the iframes using Cypress. Cool. So just a quick recap of what we've done so far. So for our first session, I did an introduction on how you can use Cypress to test your front-end application. We also looked at how you can use Cypress to test your APIs. And then a couple of weeks ago, I did a session on how we can add visual testing on our Cypress test using Applitools. As Billy mentioned, if you missed the video recordings, you can visit Expertise Recruitment's YouTube page, and the videos are all uploaded there apart from the first one. Cool. So just to take you back from the very beginning, if you attended my first session, I briefly talked about the current limitations and trade-offs that we have if you want to use Cypress. So one of the limitations is about iframes. So historically, iframes have been known to be a pain when you want to automate them. And I guess Cypress is not exempted from this. So if before I go into detail into how we can automate iframes, so just a brief overview as to what iframes are. So iframes are used if you want to embed external contents like images or videos in your websites. If you're using iframes, one of the advantage is if your page hasn't loaded, your users can still see all this external content and they don't have to go away from your site to visit this external content, so they can just access this directly on your website. When you embed an iframe though, this is loaded as a separate HTML document. We'll see later what that means. But basically, if you want to automate them, it's not added directly into our DOM. We need to be able to have a mechanism to switch to these iframes when we want to automate them. So just want to discuss as well. So there are some disadvantages if you want to use iframes. The main thing is around security. So there's a lot of security risks imposed if you're using iframes, and it could sometimes slow down your page as well if the external content takes time to load. So with that said, now that we know what iframes are, let's talk about the current limitations with using Cypress. So first of all, Cypress can't access iframes directly. Unlike any other existing tools out there, Cypress doesn't have a built-in command to switch to an iframe. So what this means is we'll have to create some custom code in order for iframes to work with Cypress. The other challenge as well, and you'll see this later when I do the Cypress test runner debugging, is if you want to debug iframes using Cypress, the iframe snapshots are currently not shown on Cypress test runner, which makes it hard to look for issues if you're automating them. So does that mean we can't automate iframes with with Cypress. So of course not. As mentioned, we'll need extra custom code though if you want to make it work with Cypress. Cool. So with that being said, as usual, I created a public GitHub repo so that you could play around with the iframes example after this session. And for this demo, I found this site that Dave Hefner created. So just to give you a quick demo on the application that we're going to automate. So this is an iframe here in the middle. And what I want to do is, let's say you want to write a test, you know, that you can type something and then you want it to, you know, add some styles on it like bold, and then we'll then verify that when this happens, then we're seeing the right response. So in this case, we need to see that the strong element is added to the text that we've just typed. So this is basically the iframe that we're going to test. Cool. I'm just going to switch to my VS Code. Cool. So I'm not going to go on the basic structure because this is just what you get when you first install Cypress. The thing that I want to focus on is adding some tests on this iframe demo.spec. And I also want to showcase more on how we can create a custom command so that we could use this command to switch to an iframe. So I've added the first test here, which I'm just going to visit on this URL. I already have my Cypress test runner open here. So if I open up the test, at the moment it will just visit the, oh, we could not detect, okay. I think I need to check if I've done something correctly. Just wait a minute. Okay, it's fine. Cool. Okay, I think it's fine. It's because I don't have any tests actually written, so that's why we saw that error. So I only have a before each hook here. So I'm just going to proceed and write our first test. So we want to be able to switch to an iframe and add some text content, for example. Cool. So if I go ahead and save this, it should now work as expected. Okay, cool. And when I mentioned the limitation that you can't actually see the iframe snapshot, so when you first run your test or every time you run your test, you can see here that, okay, you can see the iframe, there doesn't seem to be any issue, but the moment you hover or click on any of the commands, so for example, in here, you'll see that the iframe content has disappeared. And there's currently no way for us to see what's going to happen. So this is one of the strange limitations if you want to use Cypress. Whereas if you're using Cypress, so if you're just using Cypress to automate like direct applications, you'll be able to see it directly. But with iframes, it's just like a pain to automate. So just keep that in mind if you want to still use Cypress to test your iframes. Cool. What I'm going to do now is, because I'll be creating some multiple tests, rather than creating, you know, the command to switch to iframes multiple times, I'm just going to create a custom command in Cypress. So this custom command, what we want to achieve is we want to be able to switch to the iframe that we have specified. So to create a new custom command in Cypress, we just need to do cypress.commands.add, and then you want to give it a descriptive name. In this case, I want it to be called switch to iframe. And I'm just going to pass in an iframe parameter here because I want to be able to reuse this command on any iframes that I want. So in this case, I have a parameter called iframe. And then the first step is you just want to get that iframe selector. So for now, I'll just leave it as sci.get iframe. So you won't see anything yet because we still need to call this custom command. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that here. So I just need to say switch to iframe, and then we need to pass in the iframe selector that we want to switch. So I'm gonna go back to my test here, and we could use the selector playground to determine what the iframe ID is. So in this case, it's this ID. Just gonna copy that to the clipboard to make our lives easier. Actually, no, I just need this one, the ID. Cool. If I then go back to my Cypress test, cool. So again, nothing's happening yet because we're just getting the iframe, but at least it was able to detect that this iframe exists on our page. So if you're familiar with jQuery, so we're going to use a little bit of jQuery syntax here. So I'm just going to type the property that I want, and then I'll explain it more in much detail. So once we have the iframe, we want to get its content document body property. So I'm just going to type it for now and I'll explain it later. Oh, so we're using nested properties here. What that means is if I go back to our test application here, I'm just going to open up our DevTools here. So if you try to inspect the iframe, you'll see here that there is a $0 annotation here. So what this means is that if you want to access this iframe directly, you can do so by using this $0. So that explains why I've added the 0 here. So now that we have this reference to our iframe, we want to be able to get its document, which in turn is our content document here. And then since we're interested in doing something on the body document, we want to get its body. So that's why I've added 0.content_document.body. Cool. If I save that, I think I've got the test running here as well. So you could see that, okay, it's able to detect its content document body. If I just open the console, you'll see here as well that it was able to yield the iframe that we want to interact. So now that we've switched on to that iframe, there is a there is a built-in command in Cypress called sci.wrap. What that means is because this is a custom command, we want to be able to chain or to add additional built-in Cypress commands on top of our custom command here. So to do that, we need to do a .then statement. So we're saying that, okay, once we have the content document, that body of this iframe, then we want to just add the sci.wrap. So we want to be able to wrap the iframe so that we could then use additional commands like sci.type or sci.find. Cool. And then once we have this assertion here, so because we're not returning anything, this actually doesn't do anything. So we need to add the return statement before sci.get so that when we call this switch to iframe, it will return this command here. Cool. So now we could then just use the other Cypress commands like .type. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do a .type here, and I want to type, let's say hello, and let's see if that works. I'm just gonna close, gonna expand this one, close this. So you can see that it did type hello, but it didn't clear the existing content. So I want to be able to clear the existing content first so that my test is on a state that I want it to be. So to do that, we just need to invoke the .clear, which again is a built-in command on Cypress. Cool. So now it's working. You can see that the message here is hello. But then again, if I hover on any of this command, it's quite difficult to see that I'm doing the right thing. But you can see that if you run the test, it is working as expected. Cool. So the next step that I want is I want to click this bold button here so that I can change my text to be bold. So in this case, I don't need to switch to the iframe because this is part of our direct application. So I can just use again the selector playground. I think I can do that. Cool. And then copy that one. Go back to our test here. And we want to say dot click because we want to make the text bold. Okay, that didn't work because we have to select the text. So I could do it two ways, but the easiest way is for me to just invoke the command A on my keyboard. So what I'll do now is after typing hello, I'll do another type. And this case, because I'm using a Mac keyboard, I just want to do a command A. So that's one of the good thing about Cypress is that you can just invoke the keyboard shortcuts directly as well. So if we go back, cool, it's working. And for assertion, so we need to be able to check that. I'm just gonna go switch to my other one. Cool. So we need to be able to assert that it contains the P strong tag and it has the text hello. So what we could do for our assertion is we could do something like, because I think this is still part of the iframe. So we need to be able to switch back again to that iframe because if I just do something like sci.get, I think the selector is called p strong. I think we're going to get an error. Yeah, because this element exists in our iframe. So we need to be able to switch back again to this iframe. So what I'll do is I'll just copy the same command here. Cool. The problem with this one though is because this is now our parent command. So with Cypress, if it's a parent command, you can't use the .get command because .get only works if it's a parent command. If we then want to, find what the element that we want to assert on, we need to use the .find command instead. And in here, just going to double check. Okay, be strong. And we want to assert that it should have the text hello. So just type have that text and it should contain hello. So I think this should work. Cool. Okay. So you could see here that, we switch again to the iframe and it was able to find the P strong element and it has the appropriate text. Just to prove that our test actually works. So if we try to, let's say rather than strong, it was italic, then our test should fail. Yeah, because the P italic doesn't exist on the iframe. Cool. Okay. So I'm just gonna add that back. Cool. So just to recap, so we created this custom commands called switch to iframe, and we basically pass in the iframe that we want to switch on, and then we just had to wrap this custom command so we could then do assertion. So we could then do the additional commands like .clear or .find. So this might seem like, okay, it's a bit of a hassle. I have to, make sure that I create this custom command. And for some, this content document body might not even make sense. So the good thing is, Paresh, who's one of my connections in LinkedIn, recommended that there is a plugin called Cypress iframe. So Cypress iframe is just an external plugin that you can use to simplify how you can test iframes using Cypress. So I've already installed that package here. So I've added Cypress iframe as one of my dev dependencies. And then I've already added that plugin as well. So if I go to my index, I have the import Cypress iframe import statement here. So I could just use the different commands from Cypress iframe. So if you want to use Cypress iframe, you don't even need to switch to an iframe. You don't even need to create a custom command already, because there's a predefined command that you can already use. So to demo that, I'm just going to add another test here. I'm just going to copy this one using Cypress iframe. So if I remember correctly, the iframe, the method that you need to invoke, there's two methods actually. So first is you need to load the iframe. So this is, I guess, like similar to our custom command where we have to pass in the iframe name. So I'm just going to copy this one and just see if that's still working. Cool. So I was able to load our iframe. The next thing, so you can't do dot clear, dot type. You need to be able to you need to use another command called iframe, I believe. Yeah. So once we have the iframe, we could then do the same thing here that we've done on our previous test. So I'm just going to copy this one, add that here, click save. Go. So you could see here as well that it's typing the hello command. Just going to skip this one so we can just focus on the second test. Okay. So the rest is pretty much exactly similar. We want to click the bold icons to make our text strong. And then this one, rather than switching to the iframe again, because we've already loaded the frame here, so I don't need to call sci.frame loaded again. I can just call the sci.iframe directly and copy this .find and .should commands. And I think that should work. Okay. Yeah, it worked. So you could see here that the only thing that you need to worry about is passing in the iframe ID or the iframe selector that you have. And in order to do some actions on the iframe, you need to make sure that you call sci.iframe. Cool. So I'm just going to do some slight refactoring here because we're calling the iframe name multiple times. So we could create a const variable here. So let's just say iframe. So at least if I need to change the iframe selector in the future, I just need to change this line here rather than doing it multiple times. The next thing that I want to do is we have this sci.get button, and again it's called multiple times. So I can use Cypress alias to create an alias for this button rather than calling it multiple times as well. And we want to say that this is our bold icon. Yeah, that should be okay. And then to access this alias, we just need to say @bold icon. And then copy that here as well. Cool. So our test looks a bit cleaner now, and it's still passing. Cool. So this works great if the iframe is on the same domain as your application. So when I inspected this app, this iframe is not an external, iframe that you have to load. But most of the time, when you have to automate iframes, most likely the iframe source comes from an external domain. So what I want to show now is I have another test file here called cross iframe. So this is just a quick one that I've created. It's using the same command sci.switch to iframe, and it's currently visiting this index.html, which is just a simple HTML file, and we're just loading the to-do app as an iframe. So to demo that quickly, where is it? Okay. Cool. So you can see here that the to-do app that I was automating on our previous session, it's now loaded as an iframe. So this is clearly an external source that we want to automate. So if we go back to our Cypress test runner and just stop the existing one and select cross iframe, even though we already have the command to switch to an iframe, so I even use the data sci selector here to make my test more robust, you can see that our test is failing. The reason why it's failing is because since Cypress doesn't allow testing cross-domain, there is a security error that happens. To fix this, so the good news is you can fix this easily. So on your cypress.json, so at the moment mine is empty. So there is a property called Chrome Web Security. And if we set this to false, we're saying that, okay, we're disabling the web security for Chrome so that we can be allowed to test cross domains. If I save this, run this spec file again, cross iframe. Cool, and now it should work. So you just have to keep in mind that if your application is using the same domain for any of its iframe, you don't need that step. But if you're going to test external iframes, for example, in order for your test to work, you need to be able to switch the Chrome Web Security to false. Cool. And that's pretty much it in terms of the demo. Hopefully this gives you an idea on how you can automate iframes using Cypress. It's not, that difficult, but you need to add some extra, commands here, like what we've seen here on our custom command. And if you're not quite familiar with using jQuery, just know that this zero.content.document.body invokes the body property of our iframe. Cool. Just gonna go back to the presentation. So this is just a recap again of what we've done. So I already mentioned about this jQuery property, and it's a good practice to create a custom command to switch to your iframe, so you could then reuse this command in all of your other tests. I also introduced the sci.wrap command so that we can chain our iframe command with the other Cypress commands that are available. And to simplify it, so if you don't want to do the first couple of steps, you just need to install the plugin called Cypress iframe, and you just need to load the iframe and then call the sci.iframe method to then do some actions on your iframe. And lastly, if you're using cross domains for your iframes testing, you just need to remember that you have to disable Chrome Web Security to test them. Cool. If you need further resources, the first two here are the blog posts that help me understand how you can automate iframes using Cypress. And if you need more information on the Cypress iframe plugin, I've added it on this slide as well. And on that note, if there's any sort of questions, you can ask them away. Cool. I guess today's lunch and learn is much shorter because it's a very specific like demo that I've done today as opposed to the previous one. But yeah, hopefully it was still helpful for some of you.
Hey Marie, I think there's one question in the chat here from Omar that you've asked, why are you using the jQuery property and can they use any other options?
Yep, so you could definitely use the other option. So the most used one is if you just do the iframe.contents.body. But when I was looking at the Cypress blog, I noticed that Gleb wrote a previous blog post around like February 2020, and he's using that notation to basically access the iframe using the jQuery property. And if you compare that with the other ways of switching to an iframe, it's much more simpler. You just need to understand that that syntax is equivalent to switching on an iframe. But if you want to use the other ways of doing it, which is you have to call the iframes method .contents.body, then yeah, you can still use that. This is just to simplify it much more. You don't have to load the jQuery library. So in my Cypress project, I didn't have to, load jQuery. It just works on top of it. Yeah. Well, this method works when we have a nested iframe, something like iframe1 form iframe2. So I was actually expecting this question. So thanks, Sunny, for answering this, for questioning this. So to be honest, I haven't played around with nested iframes because I didn't have the need in terms of the application. So we have one application where we have to, switch to an iframe. So thankfully, it wasn't a nested iframe. So I'm afraid I don't have much input on nested iframes. But I know that there is a thread in one of the Cypress issues because I think other people can't automate, if it's a nested iframes. So I'm gonna give it a quick check again and see if there's any more workarounds. But this example is just if you have one iframes, not nested. With Cypress Web Security, let me know if I can ask. Yep, sure. So is the question around why we need to disable it, or? I tried Cypress with calls.com. Somehow Cypress was not able to land it. Okay. I think I've seen this issue as well in other Cypress issues because basically Cypress works well if you're testing your own application. So if it's an external application that you're trying to test, then you'll find this other issues with Cypress Web Security. And I think they've admitted as well that it only works really well if you're automating your own application and not external. Yeah. So with existing tools like like Selenium, we don't experience these different issues because the architecture of Selenium is very different to Cypress. So that's why I mentioned at the very beginning that this is a limitation, with Cypress. So if you're testing a lot of, iframes in your application, maybe, if you have a lot of like nested iframes, then, maybe it's not the best tool for you. But it does, automate the job if it's like for simpler iframes. And hopefully in the next Cypress releases, they do address this issue, because once we have a full iframe support, then if they're able to bypass all these different um, like iframes issues, then it would really be an excellent tool. Question from Medina: how to detect that the AUT contains iframes? Okay, so if you inspect your application, so I'm just going to show you this this sample app here. So if you just make a search on iframe, yeah. So if you see an iframe HTML tag, that definitely means that your application contains iframes. Cool. If there's no more questions, I'll share the slides on the meetup group, so you have access to the other resources that I mentioned, and also the link to the public GitHub repo, so you can play around with it more.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much again, Marie. Really good insights there. The next talk is in 2 weeks, once again on the TechFall page, and that's mocking XHR requests. So thanks a lot, guys, for coming along. Thanks again, Marie, for your help, and yeah, your awesome insights. And everyone, stay safe, and see you in the next one.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.